You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Cast. My name is Glenn Sarvati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, where we like to do cool things with financial technology. And we're back with a second batch of highlights and interviews from the recent Money 2020 conference. We will be speaking with Sanjeev Kalita, who was one of the original members of the Money 2020 team that launched the conference back in the, I got to double check the year. I think they've been going about 13, 14 years now. Back when Money 2020, the 2020 still referred to this date pretty far out in the future of what we thought the world of payments was going to look like. Now, of course, they've kind of repurposed that into 2020 vision with a slash between the two. But anyway, on top of that, David Metz of PrizeOut, a really interesting new fintech, and Amy Eisman of MSU FCU talking about the collaboration they've got going on. And another one that really shows how fintechs are discovering credit unions is a great way to go to market. So getting into both of those in just a few minutes, I'll mention first that you can always find out more about the Best Innovation Group by checking out our website, big-fintech.com. I'd be particularly interested in you having a look at the Innovation Club. We've had a lot of activity on that one recently, as well as the new announcement of 5GPT, the new artificial intelligence solution for credit unions that is in development right now. Would love to get your perspectives on that. If you take a look, you can find out more as that develops and hopefully even add your voice into the process. Also want to both thank our sponsors, CUNA, the Credit Union National Association, and also congratulate them on the merger, the CUNA and NAFCU, the National Association of Federally Chartered Credit Unions, formally announced just this past week that the merger of the two organizations passed by substantial margins and votes of both of their membership bases. Effective January 1, the two will be doing business together as America's Credit Unions, serving the full base, as they've always really been doing already. And I think I've mentioned many times, one of my favorite items on the calendar every year is CUNA GAC, the Government Affairs Conference in Washington, D.C. in late winter, early spring. It will now just be GAC because it'll actually be for the two organizations combined. And I think it will be even more fascinating than usual because I think it's going to be something of a coming out party with the first opportunity to really take a good look at how they plan to bring those two together. That's taking place on March 3rd through 6th in Washington, D.C. at the Convention Center. Hope to see you there. For those who asked, yes, last week's episode's title was, in fact, a Taylor Swift quote. The old fintech can't come to the phone right now because it's dead. That was something I actually heard from stage, which I think actually pretty well encapsulated one of the themes of the conference. That same individual who made that statement also said that it's more of a branding issue, that fintech may be in the need for rebranding. It's kind of in the crosshairs of regulators right now. It's gotten a little bit of tarnish, fairly or unfairly, because of the association with crypto and things like that. Also some of the new regulations coming down the pike. But the belief is that the foundations are extremely sturdy, and it was very clear from the enthusiasm at Money 2020 that is a widely held belief. One of my other favorite quotes that I heard from stage was from a representative from Coinbase that said that they think of themselves as a mullet company, meaning that they are business in the front and party in the back, which I thought was pretty clever. She also mentioned, Emily Choi was the woman from Coinbase who was speaking, and this was something that was a recurring theme I heard from multiple people, that the whole notion of digital assets and crypto seemed to be relatively unusual in the Washington, D.C. corridors these days as being pretty much a bipartisan issue, not really totally tilted toward the red or the blue side or anything like that. And because of that, there's a widely held perception that probably means there's a better opportunity that something constructive gets done on the legislative front. And unlike most regulation, the industry seems to want it to kind of clean things up, make sure people understand a path forward. So that'll be really interesting. Another point she made about crypto more broadly, this is again Emily from Coinbase, there's in the early days of a product or a currency, a cryptocurrency, volatility can be a feature rather than a bug because it gets attention. But she pointed out that as we move toward the maturity stage, it certainly is not very helpful. So I think that kind of speaks a lot for the way some of the major players in crypto are thinking about things these days. Speaking of moving toward maturity, Really good white paper was put out on the Money 2020 website just before the conference, and we'll post a link to that, about the age of centaurs and the idea that as we move toward product maturity, the whole notion of unicorns, which was based entirely on rapid growth and rapid valuations, really needs to be replaced by centaurs, which is a different kind of a model. Sanjeev Kalita, as I mentioned, one of the original members of the team that started up Money 2020, was the author of that paper, and also a pretty prominent presence around the conference as a wizard, as you'll hear about in just a second. And I was very happy that toward the end of the conference, when he finally had a few seconds, not having to deal with being on stage and things like that, had a chance to track him down and talk a little bit about that. I'm here with Sanjeev Kalita, who is, I love your title. You are the wizard of Money 2020.
Yes.
And in another life, you were also the CEO of Guppy, which is a credit bureau, a blockchain-based credit bureau.
Exactly.
Startup, I guess I'd say.
It is a startup, yeah.
And I mean, I don't know, you can describe wizard better than I can, but
Yeah.
I think you're also, as far as I can tell, the last man standing in terms of the original group that actually started Money 2020. You and I may be two of the only people here who have been to every event.
And it's always great to see a familiar face. and it is. It's been quite a ride. And
how did you choose the wizard title, or was it given to you?
They asked me what title I wanted, and I said, "How about wizard?"
And it worked.
I
like it.
And the idea behind it is like, part of it is like bringing a bit of the magic to the event, and that involves, like, for example, creativity. From a experience perspective, it can involve content and speakers. It can also involve trying to connect interesting companies that could work with other big companies, for example.
I like the new touch this year, where you kind of had the on-the-spot commentary in between. I saw you at a few of the sessions,
Yes.
kind of taking notes along the way, kind of teasing out some of the highlights, and then using that in the time in between as you were moving between sessions.
And thank you. I appreciate
thought it worked
that.
out well.
Thank you. And I think one of the comments that I heard from someone else is that we were able to summarize some of what was covered in more layman's language.
Yeah, exactly. And substituted for it, given the really tight time frames for these sessions, we didn't have Q&A, so you kind of almost served some of that role yourselves.
Yes, I thought it was a very creative new thing to add.
So I'm also, I don't know how much of that takes up, I'm sure this time of year it's very heavy, but your day job is the Guppy job, I assume,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
This is kind of a part-time gig.
It is. And it's a bit of balance, and there's complementarity.
Yeah.
And I mean, the biggest thing is that I enjoy being part of this industry, being part of this community.
Oh, it's so much fun, yeah.
And
I envy your job. There aren't too many people whose jobs I envy. I would love to be a Money 2020 wizard. I think it'd be really awesome.
I'm happy to have you on board.
Wonderful. I'll file my application next week. But you also, before the show began, you put out a white paper that I thought was really cool around kind of the shift from the notion of a unicorn to what you're calling a centaur.
Yes.
And I will post a link to the paper, but if you could just say a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, this came from a very personal experience. Both my younger brother and younger sister have startups.
Oh, wow.
My younger brother fundraised for a startup a couple of years ago, and he was asking me advice for what to do. And then my sister was thinking about fundraising like last year. So
very different. Amazing how different the environment became.
Exactly.
That's
and so I think
snapshot.
that sort of drove me to say, oh, this could be helpful for other folks as well.
Yeah. So if you can say a bit more about how we shifted.
Yeah. So I think like one of the biggest things is the increased scrutiny on business models, and increased scrutiny on achieving financial milestones, financial targets. And so whereas couple of years ago, maybe a little bit more focus on just on the user experience, or just on certain types of technologies,
or the revenue potential.
Yeah, or the revenue potential, and now that's sort of shifted. And also the thing with Centaur is that a Centaur is a combination of an intelligent human on top of a beast, and so. There is, I think, a little bit I think a lot of startups that can be that intelligence and partner up with a beast, like a large bank, for example, or a large institution.
Or a great VC firm that can actually provide some of that kind of firepower.
Exactly, yeah. So it's sort of like using that smarts to make a greater impact.
So it's it may not be a matter of people going out to find the next unicorn. It's more creating the next Centaur.
Exactly.
It's an added step of actually putting it together.
It is, and so the other piece is that thinking about that business as something that connects to something else, as opposed to a standalone unicorn, and I think that, and I'm obviously biased being part of a community, feeling like we've built a community. It is very much like an ecosystem kind of a view.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think, this is kind of your thought process. Do you see the VCs or the banks or anybody else really kind of, whether they've given it this term or not, you think they've actually kind of embraced this level of thinking?
I did that, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that even the past few days, just talking to VCs and hearing a little bit about how they're thinking, what types of things they're interested in, like it does line up with the Centaur paper.
I mean, one of the things I've noticed, and I'm basing this on some FD Partners statistics that I've seen, is everybody talks about the fact that fintech funding is down so dramatically, which is true. I keep looking back to saying, well, down from 2 absolutely bonkers years. So it's a little bit, choose your yardstick. Yeah. But the other thing is, it's down much more, as far as I can tell. Tell me if I'm wrong. In terms of dollars than it is in terms of number of deals. So you don't have the enormous deals. You got a lot of the 10 million-ish.
You hit the nail on the head. I think that is a very astute observation, and what that tells me is that there's a lot more early stage, a lot more seed, pre-seed, types of deals going on, and whereas the past couple of years there are a lot more bigger checks to keep interesting ideas alive. It's no longer enough to have an interesting idea. Yeah. Which, again, ties to the Centaur idea, which is, to my thinking, a couple things come to mind there. One is it may just be, and I don't want to be overly optimistic, but kind of the natural order of things. We're back to that end of the cycle. The other is it's the big stuff where, the valuations have been called more into question, and that's why you might have a little bit more gridlock in terms of making that happen. It's I think the gridlock is an interesting term because there's always like some perceived imbalance, and I think that in my mind, like I think there is greater opportunity. Like if you're building something, a lot more great developers, for example, around, or a lot more growth hackers and things like that. So I think that's why I tend to be very positive in general, but like I'm still.
I am too. I get a lot of weird looks, and I say, this funding environment isn't as bad as it looks. Yeah. I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one that thinks that. Sanjay, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm glad I managed to track you down. So the paper is available widely, right? I can just post the link to it as well.
Yes, it's available on the website. So
I'll post a link to Guppy as well.
Yeah, and, that would be great. Thank you.
And you'll have my application for Wizard next week.
Wonderful. Thank you, Glenn.
So one of the other major themes, we talked about this a bit before, one of the major themes this year, and pretty much all years I think at Money 2020, was regulation. They do a great job of bringing on stage some very heavy hitters, both in terms of current office holders in the regulatory field and former office holders. The former ones are, in my mind, very surprisingly willing to actually speak provocatively. And that was actually, again, something I really enjoyed about the conference overall. I felt like the provocative nature of the comments on stage, people didn't seem quite as guarded in terms of really conveying just the message that they wanted their organization to get out. So the whole notion of regulation played a pretty big role. One of the big ones that we've been talking about a lot is the whole notion of open banking and specifically personal financial data rights, better known sometimes as Section 1033 and a CFPB rule that is being worked on right now. The comment period is open. Encourage you. It's dry reading, but it's important reading. We'll post a link to that if you want to take a look. But that whole notion of who owns the data and how they can use it and the portability of it has a lot to do with open banking and has a lot to do with the way credit unions will be working going forward. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. There was a lot of conversation on that one. Helena McWilliams, who's the former head of the FDIC, was also kind of surprisingly candid in my mind regarding her efforts to modernize the agency in terms of the way they approached regulation on a more automated, modern technologically driven basis, getting information much earlier. She really kind of is, particularly concerned, I think rightly so, of the lag times between the end of a quarter and the time that the call reports are due and the time that the call reports can be analyzed and can then be posted for the public's perception. And the idea that there's really no reason to do that these days. You can automate all that to flow right in. She was pretty blunt about the fact that she felt that she ran into a lot of roadblocks, but the single biggest one she pointed to was, we just couldn't get the resumes, was the way she put it. She referred to the fact that there's a big opportunity cost for really heavy technology-driven people to go into the regulatory field, especially early in their careers, which is probably when you need this expertise, because time is money, and the time to actually get involved in the really exciting stuff and get involved in the ground floor of a new company and things like that. As she said, government jobs are safe jobs. They're very good jobs, but they're not the jobs that are going to be the grab the brass rings. And I think that was the types of people she was hoping to really gather to help out with the process. She actually was on stage at this together with Randall Quarles, who's the former vice chair of the Federal Reserve. I liked one of the comments he made, and again, I thought he was very insightful too. But something I think is kind of intuitive, but needs to be, we need to be reminded occasionally. The system is designed to mitigate risk, not eliminate it. So again, given what has happened over the course of the last year, I thought that was a good reminder. And then Michael Hsu, who we still have to refer to as the acting OCC head, which is getting kind of silly given how long he's had the role. He had a lot of, again, for somebody who's actually in the position and in the position of authority right now, pretty open and frank conversation. He mentioned that America's long had a separation between commerce and banking. I mean, he didn't say this, but it almost felt like a church and state kind of thing. And his perception, he said, well, it's really interesting how much longer that is actually going to, persist. In his view, it's pretty clear to me that he believes it needs to persist. And as he said, whenever those barriers come down, there's a party for a while. Maybe the mullets get involved. I don't know. You get to the back of the mullet. There's a party for a while, but it almost always ends badly. And frankly, I think he's right. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. The very last content session of Money 2020, well, I think there were a couple concurrently, but as they were basically starting to shut down the exhibit hall, was a gentleman named David Metz from Prize Out on stage with Amy Eisman from Michigan State Federal Credit Union, MSU-FCU, talking about a solution that MSU-FCU is now bringing to on a white label basis, the Prize Out solution, which they don't call gift cards. And you'll hear why in just a second as we have a conversation. But one of several, really good conversations that drove home exactly how much credit unions are bringing to the table these days. Let's have a listen to what they had to say. I'm here with David Metz, the co-founder and CEO of Prize Out, and Amy Eisman, the Chief Research and Digital Experience Officer at MSU-FCU. Amy and David were both on stage together at Money 2020 talking about, I think, a really interesting collaboration they've got going and kind of the story of how we got to where we are today with the way Prize Out's working with credit unions. David and Amy, thanks for taking the time to talk.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us, Glenn.
Let me start with you, David, because I think it's just maybe to kind of set the context is probably the best way to start. Prize Out had an interesting pivot. You did not start as, I guess at least the way was described during the session, was an ad tech company, but you started actually as a trivia game, correct?
Absolutely. It's interesting. A lot of startups are often kind of discovered by solving their own problem.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we did at our trivia company, which was called Fleetwit. So the premise of that company was basically you can challenge a friend or a stranger in many different categories. Hey, I know more than you in world geography. No, you don't. Okay, we each bet $5 or whatever the amount might be, and we each get 5 questions, and whoever answers it the quickest and the most accurately wins the money. And during that startup, I needed a way for people to withdraw their funds. So I started offering digital gift cards, and people liked that option. And then on the other side of the house, I was acquiring customers primarily through Facebook and Google. And over time, it really started to irk me that I was paying Facebook and Google all this money to acquire customers. But at the same time, every time someone withdrew funds, to one of the gift card brands. That brand was basically acquiring a customer, except we weren't profiting from it. So I reached out to some of those brands and I said, would you actually be, and would you actually pay as an option to be a withdrawal method in order to acquire customers? And they were like, of course we would. That's a great way to acquire customers. So I went to my board and I said, don't kill me, but we're going to go from trivia to ad tech. And that was the beginning stages. And that, from gaming, we got into government programs and crypto and market research. That led to eventually credit unions, which we're kind of full-fledged into right now, and that was about 1.5 years ago.
And that's the other piece I thought was really interesting, is you mentioned on stage that you really were not familiar with credit unions when you started this exploration process, right?
No, the credit union I was first exposed to, I grew up on Long Island. It was called Teachers, and I just assumed that you had to be a teacher. And then once, I think that I have my bachelor's in credit unions right now. I use the word members instead of customers. There are some things, right? But I'm slowly getting there. But the more I learn, the more I'm impressed, and the more I feel honored to have partnered with them and hopefully have a positive impact on their members' lives.
So maybe shifting over to Amy, what you've obviously you're live right now with Prize Out as a solution. I'm kind of curious, how the original match was made, and how you decided that this was a solution that you wanted to implement at MSU FCU.
Sure. Happy to share. We've been very engaged with the fintech community for several years now, and really looking at partnerships that met the need of both the credit union and where we're headed, but also our members and what drives them to engage with us. And Prize Out was really a happy marriage between both of those things. It's a great partnership from the credit union side, obviously, to engage members and keep them coming back, but also from a business standpoint of how Prize Out has set things up and really looked at the structure of what we do on a day-to-day to maintain our business and make sure it's sound and secure for our members. But they have a really unique way of being able to bring members in and keep them coming back to engage with those same experiences. So we actually met David and the Prize Out team through our QSO side of the house. So we own a Reseda group. We oversee the QSO side of that. So Reseda Group is our QSO, our credit union service organization. And David met with our Chief Digital Strategy and Innovation Officer, and they kind of hit it off, and we talked about what they were trying to do, and they stood up the QSO side of Prize Out, and we were able to actually create a partnership and invest. So not only do we really see the potential in what the product can do, but also in just what the company is doing and their total investment in helping us as credit unions stay competitive in the market. So David's education in credit unions has come obviously a long way, but also his passion for what we do and his understanding of what drives us and our mission has really been invaluable to the credit unions that are partnering with him, but also to us as we start standing it up for our members.
Was MSFCU the first credit union or financial institution in production, David, or how did you get to Reseda in the first place? Familiar with Reseda as well, a nice portfolio of companies there.
Yeah, they're amazing. I always joke they do a better job than most VCs, not only of vetting and investing, but taking those portfolio companies and having them benefit each other and introducing and creating a network that accelerates the process, right? Anyone can write a check, but to kind of really kind of pure rocket fuel onto that fire by leveraging their network, not just potentially synergies, but also just networking who knows who, or maybe maybe one of their companies has been around a little bit longer, can give advice about potential pitfalls to avoid, et cetera. So that network that they've created is absolutely amazing. But I got connected to Reseda through another credit union called Intera. And one of the things that I've learned pretty quickly when working with credit unions is, unlike other industries, they're extremely collaborative.
Yep.
If a CEO feels like they found something special and a good idea, they want to share it.
They're not going to hold it close to the vest. Exactly.
No, I can't tell you. We've had people say, if I give you X amount of money, can we have exclusivity in this state or something, right? That doesn't exist amongst credit unions. They want to share that competitive advantage with everyone, which is really, really cool to see. And as a startup, it just helps us grow even faster, right? Because it's one thing to, cold call somebody or send an email, but when a CEO of another credit union picks up the phone and says, I'm a huge fan of this, that goes a long, long distance.
I think, as I recall from our conversation earlier, you're live right now at 6 credit unions, but you're in the implementation process, and you'll be around 20, I think, by the end of the year. Do I have those numbers right?
Yeah, so we'll go live with around an additional 16 from different various providers and cores. So we'll start rolling them out at the end of the month. So the next couple of months are going to be busy, but exciting.
Now, Amy, you mentioned also one of the things I kind of like, and again, it ties into the credit union credo, is the whole shop local aspect. I think, as I understand it, the gift cards, we can come back to the phrase gift cards too, because you guys had an interesting spin on that. But it's, yes, there are big box and national names that are out there, but this is also a local business play too, right?
It is, and it gives a lot of flexibility. And I think that's what makes, partners so valuable, is that when you find people who really understand what you're trying to achieve, they will open the doors for you to do that successfully. And I think Prize Out is a great example of that. Of not only is the baseline product very engaging, very appealing on many levels, but it also allows us to do what we do best, which is bringing that local aspect. So this also gives us a place to house some of our local partners who can offer these same rewards to members who have this same incentive to bring people through the door. Like David mentioned earlier, is how do they acquire, members, or in their case, customers? But, what makes them sticky, and how can we help our members find those local partners that we really want to help build up and support? And so it's really a match made in heaven, because we've had for many years a local loyalty process, but it's become a very cumbersome thing to maintain and a very hard thing for us to add value to the community in the way that we want to, just because we aren't as flexible or as nimble as the platform that David and his team have created through Prize Out. So this is a really great upgrade, in our opinion, for us to be able to do something we're really passionate about in supporting our community, but in a way that our members are actually able to take advantage of and leverage in their day-to-day lives. So it is really kind of that symbiotic relationship that makes this very desirable, but also the core and foundation of what I think makes a really great partner is someone who understands what we're trying to achieve and gives us the opportunity to do that well.
As I understand it, I believe the Prize Out is white labeled effectively and built directly into the MSU FCU banking app, right? And one of the things you mentioned is there's a limited amount of real estate there. So you've actually made the decision that this is one of the places that you want to invest that real estate in exposing. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yes, I think that's one of the things that makes this so dynamic, is that, we only have so much real estate to give, but through the partnership with Prize Out and through the research that some of the Prize Out team has done, we know that what we offer our members best is trust, right? They've built a relationship with us. They know us. And in the research that the Prize Out team had done, they were able to see that it wasn't nearly as valuable to a member with the Prize Out brand on top of it, but it was more valuable if MSU FCU, in our case, could bring it to the member in that fashion. And so having that custom label really did allow us to engage in new ways, but it also fits our environment more naturally. So in the space that we're giving them and the real estate that we're allocating, it feels more natural to the member, but it also creates a better experience for them in terms of entering that environment and being able to access all of these things. It indicates that same trust they have with us. They know, we vetted it, that it's approved, that it's all things MSU FCU. And that really helps enhance that experience for them. But it has also really helped keep people coming back to our app. So we did an employee test, and our employees really were so excited that they were logging into their apps more. And that's saying something, because they're already logging in to their apps a lot. And so that's what I, as an experienced person, just live for, is like, what makes you come back to not just check your balance or look for a statement document, but what keeps you coming back and engaging with us in new layers. And this has really added that to our environment.
So the engagement play makes a ton of sense. Maybe just to make it a little bit more real to people, we're talking of, and they're digital gift cards. And again, David, I think you made this point. Gift card is kind of a misnomer because a lot of this activity, you're not buying them as gifts, you're buying them to use them yourself, right?
Yeah, they're self-use cards, right? It's just another way to pay, right? Whether you're typing a code that you're buying some product online, or you're scanning a QR code if you're walking into a store. So while everyone understands the word gift cards, we joke that nobody's really gifting them, right?
Yeah.
And they're using them really quickly. So if I have to go to Home Depot this afternoon, I might as well go on Prize Out and buy the digital gift card because I'm getting that bonus value. We joke that they're more like self cards than they are gift cards.
So yeah, maybe just getting into the economics a little bit if you can. And David, I don't know if it's for you or Amy, if you both can kind of weigh in on this. There
Yeah.
obviously, you've mentioned already that there's a value. The merchants see a value of acquisition. You've obviously also got the actual member has a value because you're getting additional dollars for every dollar that you spend, right?
Yeah, and the credit union. It's funny when we've spoken to like government programs, anytime we use the word ad tech, people kind of flinch because I think ad tech, as it's traditionally known, has kind of had a bad taste in people's mouths. We kind of view ourselves as disruptors. We're kind of democratizing ad tech. So all the money that the merchants and brands would have paid to Facebook and Google to acquire customers, we're saying just pay the same amount of money. We're just going to take that majority of that acquisition cost and give it to the member, right? That's a better way to get them to use your product than fancy videos or ads, right? And we're also going to take a portion of that and give it to the credit union. So the credit union actually makes more money on average than they do on interchange. So it makes more sense for the members from a financial standpoint to go through Prize Out than to just use their debit card or something like that.
It's mind-boggling. It's like it sounds like a win-win-win-win-win. You got the merchant, Prize Out, the credit union, the member. I mean, everyone's coming out ahead.
Yeah, it's rare where everyone walks away from the transaction with a smile on their face, and that we think that's what we've created.
I'm almost getting too excited about this. This is good stuff. Well, I
know how I feel.
So this is great stuff. If people want to find out more, I guess, David, I mean, is it still Prize Out, or how do we actually from a
reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or prizeout.com. Happy to have a conversation, whoever's interested, and whether you're a credit union or anyone else.
And I mean, if people happen to be listening to this right after it posts, I know I'm going to be seeing both of you down at Venture Tech. Down in Texas. I guess that'll be next Monday through Wednesday, the 6th through the 8th. So if you happen to be hearing that and happen to be in the Texas area, you can find Amy and David and me down there as well. Amy, I guess it probably is only members that could really see how this looks on your banking front end. But any other thoughts in terms of how they can kind of get a better sense for it?
You're right. Yep. So just members can access it. Obviously, that's added value for a member. So membership is always a great thing to consider. But I also just think, what I would say in terms of getting an idea for it is not only has this been a really great engagement in terms of a partnership, but they've really considered everything in terms of the workflow and how it stood up in the space and how the process works. So it's a very seamless experience for the member. It's an easy experience to stand up. We even have some complicated tech that we've built over the years that we were able to navigate. And I think not only is there value in the experience for the member and how simple it is, but an experience for the credit union in working alongside Prize Out. It has been what I consider a very true partnership. We've called and asked questions. We've thrown some crazy ideas at the wall, and their team has responded really, collaboratively with us and positively, and have shared in our excitement. And I think that is really a game changer for credit unions, is just finding people who share that same excitement and values and mission and goals that you do make for a better credit union experience. And I think that is something that I always very excitedly share with people when they ask me about it is not only is it great for my members, because that at the end of the day is where my focus is at, but it's also been really great for my team. And that is not something I get to say all of the time. So when I can, I like to scream it from, the mountaintops.
Amen. Amy Eisman of MSU FCU and David Metz of Prize Out. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. Can't wait to see as this rolls out to more credit unions. I'd love to see how this progresses.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate you having us on, and we'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you. So credit union participation, I wouldn't say that Money 2020 has ever been a big credit union heavy show, and this year it may have been down even a bit more for good reason, because you had the Nevada and California League's annual conference, REACH, going on literally right down the strip, just a few properties further down at the exact same time. So anybody from the credit union world who was inclined to be coming to Vegas that week had that option as well. But there were a few different people on stage. We talked last week. Go back if you haven't taken a listen to a couple of them who were on stage related to credit unions already. I thought that was a great conversation. And Beverly Anderson, who's been now coming up on 1 year as the CEO of BQ up in Washington State, I thought did a great job of flying the flag for the credit union difference as well. And again, this one from MSFCU and Prize Out that I thought was great. We'll be seeing them again this coming week at Venture Tech. And next week, hopefully, if we get all of our ducks in a row really quickly after the show, we'll have some interviews from that, which is another major highlight on my calendar. I think it's about 30 fintechs that we'll be seeing on stage displaying their wares over the course of 3 days down in Frisco, Texas. With that, another episode of The Big Cast in the books. My name is Glenn Sarvati. My firm is 154 Advisors. You can track me down on LinkedIn or on X at 154 Advisors. The Best Innovation Group, as I said, big-fintech.com. You can find them on LinkedIn or on X as well at Big Fintech. You can find our grand poobah, John Best, on LinkedIn at JB Fintech. You can always find us right here at the Big Cast. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Apple Music, Spotify, etc., or you can just go out to the website, big-fintech.com, click on the media tab, and you will be inundated with a series of older episodes and the archives. But I would encourage you to kind of browse through those a little bit, particularly if you enjoy these shorter segments with a variety of credit unions and fintechs and things like that. The Finovate episode had several of those recently. And as I say, next week we'll have a few more of those with Venture Tech too. Always love to hear from you. Drop us a note right there at the website, or be happy if you'd connect through via LinkedIn or Twitter. And if you're so inclined, also would love to see a subscription or a like for the podcast as well. Hope you'll check in again next week. Until then, thanks again for listening.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big Fintech. Email info@big-fintech.com. Or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.